My name is Emily Carter, and the night my father demanded the keys to my penthouse at my brother's wedding, I realized he had never truly seen me as his daughter. He saw me as an asset he believed he could control. "Either give your brother the keys," my father said loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, "or pack your things and get out of my house." I looked at him. Then I looked at my 3-year-old son Noah sitting beside me with a little piece of wedding cake smeared across his cheek. "Fine," I said calmly, "I'll go." My father blinked. He had expected tears, an argument, maybe even an apology. He got none of them. I picked up Noah, took my purse, and walked out of the reception hall. Behind me, my father shouted, "Leave the car." I stopped for half a second. My Porsche was parked beneath the hotel lights, its black paint reflecting the warm glow from the entrance. "Emily," he yelled, "you heard me!" I turned around and looked at him standing in the doorway in his expensive suit. Then I got into my car and drove away. At that moment, my father still believed the Porsche belonged to him. He also believed the penthouse he had just demanded I give my brother belonged to him. He was wrong about both, and the next morning my lawyer was going to make sure he understood exactly how wrong he was. But to understand why my father thought he could take my home, you have to understand what happened before that wedding. My name is Emily Carter, and I had spent most of my adult life trying not to disappoint my father. I was 39 years old. I had a steady career in real estate consulting, a 3-year-old son, and a life that wasn't glamorous despite what my father liked to tell people. I worked long hours. I answered emails at 6 in the morning. I sat in traffic on the Beltway. I packed Noah's lunches. I worried about daycare bills, property taxes, insurance, and whether my mother was remembering to take her car in for service. The penthouse was the one thing I had built for myself. I bought it 7 years earlier in Northern Virginia after years of saving and investing carefully. It wasn't some mansion with a private elevator and servants. It was a beautiful 3-bedroom unit in a modern building with large windows overlooking the Potomac and Washington skyline. I loved that place. Noah loved it too. His favorite thing was standing by the window in the morning and looking for airplanes. My father, Robert Carter, had never really accepted that the penthouse was mine. Whenever relatives visited, he'd say, "Emily's got a nice place. I helped her get started." That wasn't exactly true. Years earlier, Dad had lent me money for part of the down payment. I paid every penny back, every single one. I still had the bank records. But Dad never seemed to consider the debt settled. He treated that old loan like a permanent ownership certificate. My younger brother Daniel was different. Daniel was 35 and had always been Dad's favorite. If Daniel needed help with college, Dad helped. If Daniel needed help with a car, Dad helped. When Daniel started a business that failed, Dad helped again. And when Daniel announced his wedding, Dad practically became the wedding planner. I didn't resent my brother for getting married. I didn't even resent the wedding. What bothered me was the way everyone talked about the future as though my property had already been assigned to him. A few months before the wedding, Dad had casually said, "You know that penthouse would be perfect for Daniel and his new wife." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. I said, "Dad, I'm not giving Daniel my home." He frowned. "You're doing well. You can afford another place." "That's not the point." "It is family," he replied. That was always his answer. Family. As if the word erased ownership. As if being related meant you could reach into someone else's life and take whatever you wanted. I didn't think much more about it until the wedding. The reception was at a nice hotel outside Washington. White tablecloths covered the ballroom tables, and a string quartet played near the dance floor. Daniel looked happy. His bride looked beautiful. For a while I let myself enjoy the evening. Then Dad stood up. He tapped his glass. Everyone assumed he was going to make a toast. Instead, he looked directly at me. "Emily has something special to give Daniel tonight." I felt my stomach tighten. I whispered, "What are you talking about?" Dad smiled. "The keys." Several people at the table looked confused. Daniel didn't. He stared at me. I slowly realized he knew exactly what Dad meant. I said quietly. Dad's smile disappeared. "Don't embarrass yourself." I looked at Daniel. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That hurt more than Dad's demand. My own brother had apparently been told that my home was going to be his wedding present, and he had never bothered asking me. Dad leaned toward me. "Either give him the keys or pack your things and get out of my house." The words were almost surreal. I was a 39-year-old woman. I had my own home, my own career, my own car, my own child. Yet my father was threatening to throw me out of his house because I wouldn't surrender property he didn't own. I looked around the table. Nobody spoke. My mother stared down at her napkin. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I could have screamed. Instead, I stood. Fine, I said, I'll go. I picked up Noah, who was beginning to get sleepy. I walked through the ballroom and out into the cool night air. My Porsche waited at the curb. I put Noah into his car seat, buckled him in, and started the engine. Then Dad came running outside. Emily, leave the car. I looked at him through the open window. Good night, Dad. And I drove away. Noah fell asleep before we reached the highway. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to make my father understand me. I was simply going home. And for the first time, I understood something that should have been obvious much earlier. My father didn't know where my home was. He only knew where he thought my obedience ended. The next morning, he was about to learn the difference. The next morning, I woke up before Noah. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the unfamiliar curtains, the small hotel lamp on the nightstand, and Noah's little shoes beside the armchair. The night before, after leaving the wedding, I had checked into a hotel rather than going to the penthouse. I didn't want to arrive home with my father still calling my phone every 5 minutes. I wanted one quiet night. I got it. Mostly. My phone showed 17 missed calls. 4 from Dad. 3 from Mom. 2 from Daniel. The rest were from relatives who apparently believed a wedding reception was the proper place to conduct a property dispute. I didn't return any of them. Instead, I ordered breakfast. Noah woke up just as the knock came at the door. Mommy? Good morning, sweetheart. He rubbed his eyes. Are we going home? I looked at him. Yes, I said, soon. I just wasn't sure what home meant anymore. At 8:14 that morning, my phone rang. It was Michael Bennett, my attorney. I had known Michael for nearly 6 years. He had helped me with the purchase of the Penthouse, reviewed several contracts for my business, and handled my estate documents after Noah was born. He never called early unless something mattered. Good morning, I said. Emily, I heard about last night. I closed my eyes. Dad called you? Your father called my office at 7:02 this morning. Of course he had. What did he say? Michael sighed. He told my receptionist that you were refusing to honor a family agreement concerning your penthouse. I almost laughed. There is no family agreement. I know. His voice was calm. That's why I'm calling you. I moved toward the window while Noah ate pancakes from the little hotel breakfast tray. Michael, Dad said I had to give Daniel the penthouse or leave his house. Was the wedding held at your parents' home? No, it was at a hotel. Then I'm guessing he meant you were no longer welcome to live with them. I stared at the traffic moving along the road below. I haven't lived with my parents in almost 20 years. There was a pause. Then Michael said, that's what I thought. I sat down. Why would he say that? Because he believes he has some kind of authority over your property. He doesn't. No. Michael's answer came immediately. He doesn't. Those 3 words did something to me. For years, I had been so accustomed to my father's certainty that sometimes I confused confidence with authority. Michael didn't. He dealt in documents, facts, signatures, dates, not family pressure. Let's go through everything, he said. So we did. The deed was in my name. Solely. The mortgage had originally been in my name. Solely. The insurance was in my name. The property taxes were paid from my account. The homeowners association records listed me as the owner. There was no trust. No partnership. No agreement giving my father an interest in the property. Nothing. Then Michael asked the question I had been expecting. Did your father contribute any money toward the purchase? Yes. How much? I told him. And was it a gift or a loan? A loan. Do you have proof it was repaid? Yes. Keep it ready. I walked to my suitcase and pulled out an old folder. I had kept copies of everything. The original loan agreement. Bank statements. Canceled checks. The final repayment. I spread them across the hotel desk. Michael looked at the documents I had photographed and sent him. You repaid him in full? Yes. Does he have any other written claim? Not that I know of. Then, legally, this is much simpler than the family drama makes it sound. I sat quietly. Michael. Yes. Can my father actually take the penthouse? No. The answer was so simple that I almost cried. Not because I was afraid. Because I suddenly realized how long I had allowed myself to be afraid. Michael continued. However, if he has been telling people that Daniel owns the property, we should document that. And if he has contacted your building management or attempted to access the unit, I want to know immediately. My stomach tightened. Why? Because ownership is one issue. Unauthorized access is another. I looked toward Noah. He was carefully arranging blueberries on his plate. I said I'll call the building manager. Do that. After we hung up, I finally called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Emily. Her voice was small. Mom, are you okay? I should be asking you that. I've got Noah, we're fine. She began crying. That was unusual for my mother. She had spent most of my childhood avoiding conflict, especially with Dad. I didn't know he was going to say that, she whispered. You knew he wanted the penthouse. I knew he talked about it. Mom, Daniel knew too. Silence. That silence told me everything. Did Daniel know? He thought your father had arranged something. I leaned back in my chair. Arranged what? He told Daniel that after the wedding you would move somewhere smaller and Daniel and his wife would move into the penthouse. I closed my eyes. They had planned my life without me. My mother whispered, I thought you had agreed. No, Mom. I should have asked you. Yes. She started crying harder. I softened. Mom, I don't want to fight with you. I know. But I can't give Daniel my home. I understand. It was the first time she had said those words. Then she added something that made my heart sink. Your father says you're being selfish. I looked out the window. Mom, if Daniel needs a home, he can buy one. You know how much the wedding cost. That's not my responsibility. I know. She paused. Then she said, I think your father believed you would give in. So did I. The truth surprised me. I had believed it too. Not because I wanted to. Because I'd spent so many years being trained to avoid disappointing him. That afternoon, Michael sent the formal letter. It was direct and unemotional. It stated that I was the sole owner of the penthouse and that no transfer had been authorized. It also made clear that neither my father nor my brother had permission to enter the property, remove belongings, change locks, arrange movers, or represent themselves as owners. I read it twice, then I signed the authorization for Michael to send it. An hour later, my phone rang. Dad? I answered. Emily. His voice was cold. You've hired a lawyer against your own father. No, Dad. I hired a lawyer to protect my property. After everything I've done for you, I took a breath. You mean the money I repaid? He went silent. Then his voice hardened. You've become disrespectful. No, Dad, I've become independent. He hung up. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 10 minutes later, Michael called again. Emily, there's one more thing. What? Your father has already told the building management that he is entitled to access your penthouse. I stood up. Did they let him in? No. I exhaled. Thank God. Michael's voice became serious, but we need to make sure he never gets that opportunity again. For the first time since the wedding, I understood that this wasn't simply a family argument anymore. My father had decided that my boundaries were something he could negotiate. I was about to show him they weren't. By Monday morning, the wedding was already over, but my family's version of it seemed to be just getting started. I woke up to another dozen messages. Most were from relatives I hadn't spoken to in months. One cousin wrote, Your dad says you're refusing to help your brother. Another said it's only temporary. Why make such a big deal? Someone I barely remembered from a family reunion sent me a message that simply said, Family comes first. I stared at that one for a long time. Then I deleted it. I had spent enough years allowing other people to define what family meant. That morning, Michael called me again. I spoke with your building manager, he said, and they confirmed your father has no authorization to access the building or your unit. I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. Thank you. There is one other issue. What now? Your father told them the Porsche is also his. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so absurd that my mind didn't know what else to do. He told the building manager that, yes. I rubbed my forehead. Michael, he didn't buy that car. I know. I did. I know. I made the payments. I know, Emily. His calm voice almost made me smile. Then why is he saying it? Because he believes he has a claim. Based on what? A repair bill. I stopped. What? Apparently about 4 years ago he paid for a major repair after you had an accident. That was a reimbursement. He says it was a gift toward the purchase. I shook my head. No. He paid the repair shop because I was out of town and asked him to handle it. I transferred the money to him the following week. Do you have proof? Yes. Good. I was beginning to understand why Michael always asked for paperwork before opinions. I had the documents. I had the bank statements. I had the emails. I had the receipts. My father had something else. A belief that being my father meant he could rewrite history. That afternoon Daniel called. I almost didn't answer. Then I saw his name and thought about the fact that despite everything he was still my brother. Hello, Emily. He sounded exhausted. How are you? Not great. I sat at my kitchen island in the temporary apartment I had rented for a few weeks while everything settled down. What's going on? My wife is upset. I imagine. She says you embarrassed us. I stared at the wall. Daniel, Dad embarrassed everyone. He was trying to help us. No, he was trying to give you something that belonged to me. It's just a house. That sentence landed differently coming from my brother. I looked down at my coffee. If it's just a house, Daniel, why do you need mine? Silence. He didn't answer. I waited. Finally, he said, Dad said you'd move. Did you ever ask me? No. Did you ever call me? No. Did you ever wonder why I would suddenly give you a home worth that much money? He sighed. I thought Dad had talked to you. He did. And I said no. Daniel became defensive. But you always have more than me. I closed my eyes. There it was. The sentence I had heard in different forms since childhood. You have more. You can handle it. You're responsible. You're the one who can make sacrifices. I said Daniel having more doesn't mean I owe you what I own. He didn't respond. Then he said quietly, I thought you loved me. I felt my chest tighten. I do love you. Then help me. I will help you find a solution. I need the penthouse. No, you need affordable housing. He hung up. I sat there for a long time. I wasn't angry with him. Not entirely. I was disappointed. Because Daniel had spent his whole life believing someone else would solve his problems. And this time everyone had decided I would be that someone. The next day I drove to my penthouse. I didn't take Noah. I wanted to walk through the rooms alone. When the elevator opened, everything looked exactly as I had left it. My photographs were still on the hallway table. Noah's wooden train sat beside the sofa. A stack of real estate reports waited on my desk. Nothing had changed. And yet I felt different. For years this place had represented success to me. Now it represented something else. Choice. I walked into the kitchen and remembered the day I received the keys. I had stood there alone holding a bottle of champagne, laughing and crying at the same time. I had called Dad. He had said, good, I told you we'd get you there. At the time I didn't question the wording. Now I did. He had helped. But I had done the work. That distinction mattered. My phone rang. It was Michael. Are you at the penthouse? Yes. Good. I want you to check something. What? Your building manager told me your brother's name came up when your father contacted them. I frowned. Daniel called them, apparently. I looked around. Why? I don't know. But I want you to document everything. Take photographs, check your valuables, make sure your personal documents are secure. I did exactly what he said. Nothing appeared to be missing. Then I found something on my kitchen counter. A folder. I hadn't left it there. I opened it. Inside were measurements of the living room, a rough floor plan, a furniture estimate, a list of renovation costs, and a business card from a moving company. I sat down. Someone had already planned how they were going to move into my home. I called Michael. I found something. What? I think Daniel has been planning the move. There was a pause. Photograph everything. I did. Then I called Daniel. He answered immediately. Emily, did you prepare plans for my penthouse? Silence. Daniel. Finally he said Dad said it was happening. That's not what I asked. You thought you could move into my home without asking me? No. Yes. He exhaled. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you didn't think about me at all. Another silence. Then he said, you know what Dad always says? What? What's yours is the family's. I looked around my living room. No, Danielle. My voice was steady. That's what Dad says. I hung up. That evening my father called. You've been talking to your brother. Yes. You're poisoning him against the family. No, Dad, I'm telling him the truth. You're being selfish. I had heard that word so many times that it barely affected me anymore. Dad, you don't own my home? I helped you get it. And I repaid you. That doesn't matter. I looked toward the window. The lights of Washington were beginning to appear across the river. No, I said quietly. It matters very much. He started shouting. I let him. When he finally stopped, I said one sentence. I'm not giving Daniel my penthouse. Then I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty afterward. I felt relieved. But the relief didn't last. The following morning, Michael called with a warning. Emily, your father is telling relatives that he's going to challenge your ownership. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Can he? Anyone can make a claim. And can he win? Michael paused. Not based on the documents we've reviewed. I exhaled. Then let him try. I didn't know it yet, but my father was about to discover that the family story he had told for years was very different from the paper trail. And paper had a way of remembering things people wished it would forget. By the end of that week, my father had managed to turn a private family argument into the subject of conversation at half the family gatherings in Northern Virginia. I heard about it from cousins. I heard about it from an aunt who hadn't called me in 3 years. I even heard about it from an old family friend who stopped me outside a grocery store in Alexandria. She touched my arm and said, "Emily, I hope you and your father work things out." I smiled politely. So do I. But I had stopped trying to explain myself. The people who mattered knew the truth. The people who believed my father without asking questions were going to believe whatever version of the story made them comfortable. Meanwhile, Michael was working quietly. That was his way. No dramatic threats. No angry phone calls. Just documents, dates, and careful instructions. On Friday morning, he called me. "I've spoken with the property manager." "What did they say?" "They want to update your access records." "Why?" "Because your father gave them the impression that your brother would be moving into the unit." I closed my eyes. Did they believe him? No, but they wanted everything clarified in writing. I appreciated that. People who managed apartment buildings didn't have the luxury of taking sides in family disputes. They needed to know who owned what. I drove to the building that afternoon. The property manager, a woman named Linda, met me in the lobby. She looked embarrassed. "Emily, I'm sorry you're dealing with this. You don't have to apologize." She handed me a folder. "Your father contacted the office twice." I opened it. There were notes documenting his calls. On one occasion, he had asked about changing the locks. On another, he had asked whether a moving company could reserve the freight elevator. I stared at the pages. He was arranging movers. Linda nodded. He said the new residents would be arriving after the wedding. I let out a slow breath. The wedding had been less than a week ago. My father hadn't simply made an impulsive demand at dinner. He had planned for my life to change before he ever told me. That realization hurt. I looked at Linda. "I want to make sure no one can access my unit without my permission." "We can do that. Even family." She gave me a sympathetic smile. "Especially family when there's a dispute." We went through the access list. My name remained the only owner. My parents were removed from an old guest access list I had forgotten about. Daniel's name was never on it. We updated the emergency contact information. Then I changed the electronic access code. It wasn't dramatic. No police. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just a few clicks on a computer screen. But when I received the confirmation email, something inside me settled. My home was mine again. That evening I went upstairs alone. I stood in the entryway for several minutes. The penthouse looked exactly as it always had. But I felt like I was seeing it for the first time. I walked through the living room, past the photographs of Noah, past the bookshelves, past the dining table where I had hosted Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. Then I noticed something. On the desk in the spare bedroom was a folder I hadn't seen before. I opened it. It contained copies of the same furniture measurements I'd found earlier. But there was more. A renovation estimate. A list of appliances. A proposed paint color. And a handwritten note. "Move-in target December 1. I stared at those words. December 1st was only 3 weeks away. My brother had been planning to move into my home before Christmas. I called Michael. I found another folder. "What's in it?" I explained. "Keep it," he said. I was going to throw it away. "Don't." "Why?" "Because it demonstrates what they believed was going to happen." I sat down. "Michael, I don't want to destroy my family." "You aren't." "I don't want Daniel to lose his marriage because of this." "That isn't your responsibility either." I knew he was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. The next afternoon I asked Daniel to meet me. We chose a quiet coffee shop in Old Town Alexandria. He arrived alone. He looked tired. Not angry. Just tired. He sat across from me. "I know you're mad. I'm disappointed." He nodded. "I deserve that." I didn't expect him to say it. I took a sip of coffee. "Did you really think I agreed to give you the penthouse?" "No." He looked down. "I thought Dad would make you agree." "That isn't better." "I know." For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel said the wedding cost more than we planned. "I know." "Dad said the penthouse would solve everything." I looked at him. "Daniel, your financial problems didn't become my property just because Dad promised you something." "I know." "You need to hear this." He nodded. "You're my brother. I love you. But I will never again let Dad make you believe that what belongs to me is automatically available to you." He looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry." It was the first genuine apology I'd received from anyone in my family. I reached across the table. "I believe you." He looked at me. "What happens now? You find a home you can afford." He laughed bitterly. "That's easier said than done." "Then let me help you make a budget." "You do that?" "Yes." But not the penthouse. Never the penthouse. For the first time he smiled. Then his expression changed. Dad is going to be furious. I know. He nodded slowly. He thinks you're still going to give in. I won't. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Why are you so calm? I thought about that. Because years ago I would have been crying. I would have called Mom. I would have asked what I could do to make everyone happy. I would have offered money. Maybe even the house. Not anymore. Because I'm tired of being afraid of disappointing him. Daniel didn't answer. When I returned home that evening, my phone was ringing. Dad, I answered. What did you say to your brother? I told him the truth. You're turning him against me. No. You're ruining his marriage. No, Dad. My voice remained calm. You promised him something that wasn't yours to give. He started shouting. I pulled the phone away from my ear. When he finally stopped, I said, You need to stop contacting my building. I can do whatever I want. No, you can't. You're my daughter. Yes. And I'm your father. Yes. Then you owe me respect. I looked around the room. I respect you as my father. I paused. But respect doesn't mean obedience. He hung up. That night, I sat beside Noah's bed while he slept. His little chest rose and fell beneath the blanket. I thought about the family I wanted him to grow up in. I didn't want him to learn that love meant surrender. I didn't want him to believe the person with the loudest voice automatically won. And I certainly didn't want him to grow up thinking that being generous meant allowing people to take advantage of you. The next morning, my mother called. Her voice sounded different. Quieter. More determined. Emily, she said, there's something you need to know about your father. I sat down. What? She took a long breath. It isn't just about the penthouse. What do you mean? I've been keeping something from you for years. My heart began beating faster. What? She hesitated. Then she said, your father wasn't always this controlling about money. I waited. He became this way after something happened with my parents. I frowned. Grandma and Grandpa? Yes? What happened? My mother was silent for several seconds. Then she finally said, your father has been telling you a very different story about where our family's money came from. I stared at the phone. For the first time, I wondered whether the penthouse wasn't the beginning of my father's need for control. Maybe it was only the latest chapter. And whatever my mother was about to tell me could explain why he had spent my entire life believing that everything in the family ultimately belonged to him. My mother asked me to come over the following Saturday morning. Just come alone, she said. I knew immediately that she wasn't asking for a casual visit. So I dropped Noah off with a trusted sitter and drove to my parents' house in Arlington. The house looked exactly as it had when I was growing up. Same brick walkway. Same white porch railing. Same maple tree near the driveway that my father had planted when Daniel was born. For a moment I was 12 years old again, coming home from school and wondering whether Dad would be in a good mood. That feeling disappeared the moment I walked through the front door. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee. My father wasn't there. Where's Dad? He went to the hardware store. I sat across from her. What happened with Grandma and Grandpa? Mom looked down at her coffee. My parents left me an inheritance. I knew that much. What kind? Money, some investments, a small piece of property in Maryland. I frowned. I thought Grandpa left everything to Dad. He didn't. My mother reached into a drawer and pulled out an old envelope. I never wanted you children involved in this. She placed it on the table. Inside were photocopies of financial documents, an old will, and several letters. I read slowly. My grandparents had left the majority of their estate to my mother, not my father. My mother had sold the Maryland property years later and used a large portion of the proceeds to stabilize the family's finances after one of Dad's business ventures failed. You used your inheritance to help Dad. She nodded. He promised he'd repay me. Did he? No. I looked at her. Mom. She gave me a sad smile. I kept hoping he would. I felt something heavy settle in my chest. How much? She told me. It was a substantial amount. Not enough to make someone wealthy forever, but enough to change the course of a family's life. I looked at the papers again. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to hate your father. I almost laughed. I don't hate him. I know. She looked toward the window. But you were always different from Daniel. How? You never believed Dad's version of everything. I thought about that. Maybe she was right. I had always questioned things. I had always wanted to see the paperwork. I had always wanted to know why. Daniel trusted Dad. I challenged him. And perhaps that was why my father had spent years trying to convince me that independence was disrespect. Mom continued. When you bought the penthouse, your father told everyone he had made it possible. He helped with the down payment. He did. And I repaid him. I know. She folded her hands. But your father never saw it that way. What did he see? He saw it as proof that he still had a claim over you. I stared at her. That sentence explained more than I wanted it to. The controlling phone calls. The questions about my finances. The way Dad always wanted to know where I was spending money. The way he acted offended whenever I made a decision without asking him. Mom whispered, he doesn't know how to help people without expecting control in return. I looked at the old documents. Why didn't you stop him at the wedding? She looked ashamed. I was afraid. That hurt. Not because I blamed her. Because I understood. I had been afraid too. For years, a car door slammed outside. Mom quickly gathered the papers. Put those away. Why? Because I don't want him to know I showed you. I stood. Mom, you shouldn't have to hide documents in your own house. She looked at me. You sound like yourself again. What does that mean? When you were younger, you used to tell your father, that's not fair. I smiled faintly. I did. You stopped saying it. I looked toward the hallway. I got tired. Mom nodded. So did I. The front door opened. Dad walked into the kitchen carrying a hardware store bag. He stopped when he saw me. What are you doing here? Mom asked me to come. His eyes moved between us. About what? Mom stood. About the penthouse. Dad's expression hardened. I've already told Emily what she needs to know. No, Mom said. It was the first time I had heard that tone from her. Dad stared at her. No. The kitchen became silent. Mom took a breath. You don't get to decide what our daughter owns. Dad looked stunned. Karen, she repaid you. That isn't the point. What is the point, Robert? He looked at me. You're turning your mother against me. No, Mom said. You're doing that yourself. Dad's face reddened. I had never seen my mother speak to him that way. Not once. He turned to me. You've caused enough trouble. I answered quietly. I didn't cause this. You refused to help your brother. I refused to give him my home. He deserves a chance. So do I. Dad shook his head. You've always been selfish. I felt something inside me go still. Usually that word would have hurt. This time it didn't. Maybe because I finally understood what he meant by selfish. He meant unwilling to surrender. I said, if protecting my home, my son, and my financial future makes me selfish, then I'm comfortable with that. Dad looked at Mom. She didn't look away. He left the kitchen. I waited until the front door slammed. Then Mom began to cry. I walked over and hugged her. I don't want you to be afraid anymore. She held me tightly. I should have said something years ago. You're saying it now. That afternoon I returned to the penthouse. The first thing I did was call the building manager. I asked whether the locks could be changed. They can, Linda said. We'll schedule a licensed locksmith. I also asked her to update every access code. No shortcuts. No family favors. Everything documented. 2 days later, the locksmith arrived. He replaced the lock on my front door and updated the electronic system. It took less than an hour. But when he handed me the new key, I stood there holding it longer than necessary. That little piece of metal represented something bigger than a door. It represented the boundary I had finally drawn. That evening, Michael called. Everything's secure. Yes. Good. I told him about my mother's documents. He listened carefully. Emily, don't get distracted by old family finances unless they become legally relevant. I know. The strongest position you're in is the simplest one. Your property is yours. I understand.
Good.
Then he added, your father may still try to pressure you emotionally. I smiled sadly. He's been doing that my entire life. This time you don't have to respond. I looked around the living room. For the first time I believed him. That night I cooked dinner. Nothing fancy. Chicken rice and green beans. Noah sat at the table in his dinosaur pajamas. He told me a long story about a toy truck that apparently had a very serious accident. I listened and laughed. For a while the family conflict disappeared. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Dad says he's going to challenge the ownership. I stared at the message. I typed back. He can do what he believes he needs to do. Then another message arrived. Are you sure you want to take this that far? I looked at Noah. He was laughing at something on television. I replied, I'm not taking it anywhere. I'm simply not giving away what belongs to me. I put the phone down. That was the moment I realized the difference. I wasn't fighting my father anymore. I was standing still, and he was the one running into the wall. For the first time since the wedding, I stopped waiting for my father to change his mind. I went to work. I took Noah to preschool. I paid my bills. I met with clients. I bought groceries. I even went to the dry cleaner and picked up a suit I'd forgotten there 2 weeks earlier. Ordinary things. That was what made the situation feel strange. My father was threatening to challenge my ownership of my home, but the rest of the world kept moving as if nothing had happened. Maybe that was the lesson. Family drama can make you feel as though the whole world has stopped. It hasn't. On Monday afternoon, Michael called. "Your father hasn't filed anything." I was sitting in my office. "That's good." He's still making calls, though. "To whom? Relatives, friends, anyone who will listen?" I sighed. "What is he saying?" "That you stole from the family." I almost laughed. How can someone steal something from himself? You'd be surprised what people believe when they hear the same story enough times. I looked out my office window. What should I do? Nothing. Nothing. Don't defend yourself to everyone. Don't argue. Don't post anything online. Don't threaten him. Keep your records and live your life. It was excellent advice. So I followed it. That evening I received a call from my Aunt Margaret. She was one of the few relatives I trusted. "Emily, I want to ask you something." "Okay. Did your father really pay for your penthouse?" "No. He says he did. He loaned me money for part of the down payment. I repaid him." There was a long silence. "I didn't know that. Most people don't." "I believe you." That meant more to me than she probably realized. Then Aunt Margaret said something unexpected. "Your father has been telling people Daniel is already financially committed to the penthouse." "How?" "He says Daniel signed something with the movers." I sat upright. "What?" "I don't know the details." I immediately called Michael. He answered quickly. "I was just about to call you." "About Daniel?" "Yes." My stomach tightened. "What happened?" "Your father contacted a local moving company again." "Again?" "He apparently tried to reserve a date." I closed my eyes. "Can he do that?" "He can call a moving company. He can't legally move someone else's property." "Did the company agree?" "No. They called your building manager after becoming uncomfortable with the situation." I exhaled. "Good." Michael paused. "Emily, I want you to consider one thing." "What?" "Your father may be acting from desperation now." I frowned. Desperation. He may have promised Daniel something he cannot deliver. Now he's trying to save face. That made sense. My father hated being wrong, especially publicly. And he'd promised my brother a home in front of the family. Admitting that he had no right to give it away would mean admitting that he had been wrong from the beginning. I understood something then. The penthouse wasn't the real battle. Control was. The next evening, Daniel came to my apartment. He stood outside the door for several seconds before knocking again. When I opened it, he looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" "Yes." He sat on the sofa. Noah was asleep in his room. Daniel looked around. "It's nice." "What?" "The apartment." "Thank you." He smiled sadly. "I don't know what I'm going to do." "About the house. About everything." I sat across from him. "Tell me." He rubbed his hands together. "After the wedding, my wife and I looked at our finances. And we're in worse shape than I thought." I didn't interrupt. "The wedding cost more than Dad told us it would. I put some expenses on credit cards." "How much?" He told me. It was a serious amount, not catastrophic, but enough to create years of pressure if handled badly. I said, "You need a financial plan." "I know. I can help you make one." He looked at me. "You'd still help me?" "Of course. Even after all this." "You're my brother." He lowered his head. I was wrong. I waited. "I should have asked you." "Yes." "I shouldn't have believed Dad." "No." He looked at me. "But I don't know how to tell him." "You don't have to convince him." "Then what?" "Let the paperwork speak." He smiled. "You sound like your lawyer." "Michael is rubbing off on me." We both laughed. It was the first time we had laughed together since the wedding. Then Daniel became serious. "I think Dad is scared." "Of what?" "Losing control." I didn't answer. Because I knew. The next morning my father called me. I almost didn't answer. But I did. "Hello? I want you to come over." "Why?" "We need to settle this as a family." I agreed. Not because I expected him to apologize. Because I wanted to hear him say what he really wanted. When I arrived, my parents were sitting in the living room. Mom looked nervous. Dad looked angry. He pointed to a chair. "Sit." I sat. He had a folder on the coffee table. "What is that?" "Proof that I helped you buy the penthouse." He opened it. Inside were old bank records. I recognized them. The original loan. The exact documents I had already given Michael. Dad tapped the papers. "I paid this." "Yes, so it's partly mine." "No." His face hardened. "You admit I paid?" "Yes." "You admit it?" "I also repaid it." He looked at Mom. She quietly nodded. Dad slammed the folder shut. That doesn't matter. I stared at him. Why doesn't it matter? Because I'm your father. There it was. The entire argument. Not the deed. Not the money. Not the loan. That one sentence. Because I'm your father. I said Dad being my father doesn't make you my landlord. He looked shocked. Mom covered her mouth. I continued. You helped me once. I appreciated it. I repaid you. That should have been the end of it. Dad's voice became quieter. You're really going to shut me out? No. I paused. I'm going to stop letting you control me. His eyes filled with anger. Then something unexpected happened. Mom spoke. Robert, she's right. He looked at her. She continued. You've spent years telling yourself that everything you did for this family gave you ownership over us. Dad didn't respond. Mom's voice trembled. You did it with my inheritance too. His face changed. I looked at her. She had finally said it. The room went silent. Dad stood. That's enough. No, Mom said. It was the first time I'd ever heard her say those words to him. No, Robert, it isn't enough. He looked at both of us. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then he walked out. The front door closed behind him. Mom began crying. I reached for her hand. You were brave. She shook her head. I should have done it years ago. Maybe. She looked at me. But you did it today. That evening I went home to Noah. I watched him sleep. And I thought about what revenge actually meant. I could have spent the next 10 years trying to hurt my father. I could have embarrassed him publicly. I could have told everyone every secret I knew. But what would that accomplish? It wouldn't give me peace. It wouldn't make Noah safer. And it wouldn't change the past. What I could do was refuse to continue the pattern. I could keep my home, protect my son, help my brother without enabling him, and give my parents the chance to decide whether they wanted a relationship with me based on love rather than control. A week later, Michael called. He sent me something. What? A letter. From Dad. Yes. I sat down. What's in it? Michael paused. You should read it yourself. The next afternoon, I opened the envelope. It contained only 3 pages. 3 pages that would change the way I remembered my father. I held my father's letter for several minutes before opening it. It was strange to see his handwriting again. When I was a child, he had written notes on the refrigerator in thick black marker. Take out the trash. Lock the back door. Don't forget your homework. His handwriting had always looked confident. This time the letters were uneven. The first line said, Emily, I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm making excuses. I kept reading. He admitted that he had been wrong about the penthouse. He admitted that he had no ownership interest in it. He admitted that the money he gave me years ago had been a loan and that I had repaid it. He admitted that the Porsche was mine. Then he wrote something that made me stop. I convinced myself that helping you meant I had a permanent place in every decision you made. I read that sentence twice, then I continued. He wrote about Daniel. He admitted that he had promised my brother the penthouse without ever asking me. He said he had believed I would eventually agree because I had always been the one who made sacrifices for the family. That sentence hurt. Not because it was new. Because it explained so much. I had been the responsible daughter. The flexible one. The one who understood. The one who could afford to give more. And somehow over the years those qualities had become expectations. Dad's letter continued. I thought I was protecting Daniel. Instead I taught him to expect things he hadn't earned. I put the letter down. For the first time my father wasn't defending himself. He was admitting what he had done. There was no demand at the end. No reminder of what he had sacrificed. Just an apology. I called Mom. Did you know about the letter? No. Do you think he means it? She was quiet. I don't know. That was the honest answer. And I appreciated it. Because forgiveness shouldn't require pretending someone has changed before they actually have. The following Sunday, Dad asked if he could see Noah. I agreed. But I made one condition. He comes to my house. Mom hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. I wanted to see whether Dad could walk through my front door without treating it like something he was entitled to. He arrived at 2 in the afternoon. He stood outside the building and waited for me to come down. He didn't ask the doorman to let him upstairs. He didn't call the property manager. He didn't demand anything. He simply waited. That small act told me more than his letter had. I brought him upstairs. When the elevator doors opened, Dad stepped inside. He looked around. Then he smiled. You really did build a beautiful home. Thank you. He nodded. I used to think I had built it. I looked at him. You helped me get started. He swallowed. But you built it. It was a simple distinction, one I had waited years to hear. Noah came running into the room. "Grandpa?" Dad's face changed immediately. He knelt down and opened his arms. Noah ran into them. I stood there watching. For all the things my father had done wrong, he loved his grandson. That didn't erase anything, but it reminded me that people could be complicated. They could cause damage and still love you. They could be wrong and still have the capacity to change. Dad played with Noah for nearly an hour. He never mentioned the penthouse, never mentioned Daniel, never mentioned the Porsche. When he was leaving, he stopped near the door. "Emily." "Yes? I owe you something." "What?" "An apology without conditions." I didn't say anything. He looked at me. I was wrong. My eyes filled with tears. "I know. I should never have demanded your home." "No. I should never have told you to leave." "No. And I should never have told Daniel it was his." I nodded. Dad looked toward the living room. "I'm proud of you." I hadn't expected that. Those 4 words hit harder than I thought they would. "Thank you." He left. I closed the door behind him. Then I stood there for a long time. I had spent weeks imagining what victory would feel like. I had imagined my father embarrassed. I had imagined him admitting defeat in front of the entire family. I had imagined Daniel apologizing publicly. I had imagined proving every relative wrong. None of that happened. Instead, my father quietly admitted he was wrong in my living room. And somehow that meant more. A few weeks later, Daniel and his wife found a townhouse they could afford. It wasn't a penthouse. It wasn't luxurious. But it was theirs. Daniel called me after they signed the lease. "We did it. I'm happy for you. We're going to have to budget." "You'll survive." He laughed. Then he said, "Thanks for helping me." "You're welcome." He paused. "I think I needed someone to tell me no." I smiled. Most people do sometimes. His wife and I eventually became closer too. She apologized for things she had said after the wedding. I told her I understood. The wedding itself became a strange family story. Years later, I knew we'd probably laugh about the absurdity of it. But at the time, it had been painful. My mother changed too. She started managing her own finances independently. She opened a separate account. She reviewed her estate documents. She finally updated her will. "She told me your father isn't angry about it anymore." Good. He actually said he should have encouraged me to do it years ago. That was another small sign that maybe the family was changing. Not dramatically. Not overnight. Just slowly. One choice at a time. As for me, I kept the penthouse. I kept the Porsche. But I also kept something else. Perspective. I learned that having money doesn't make you selfish. Having property doesn't make you responsible for everyone's financial problems. Helping family is a gift. It should never become a chain. And I learned something else that I wish someone had taught me when I was younger. Keep your paperwork. Keep your receipts. Keep your deeds. Keep copies of your bank records. If you lend money to family, put the terms in writing. If you own property, know exactly whose name is on the deed. If someone tells you your family so it belongs to all of us, don't let guilt replace legal reality. Love people. Help people. But know where your responsibility ends. One evening, months after the wedding, I stood beside the penthouse window with Noah. He was older now. He pointed toward the sky. "Mommy airplane." I smiled. "Yep." "Where's it going?" "Somewhere far away." He looked at me. "Can we go? Maybe someday." He smiled. I watched the sunset over the Potomac and thought about how close I had come to surrendering something I'd worked for simply because my father had told me that was what a good daughter did. I understood now. A good daughter doesn't have to obey every demand. A good sister doesn't have to sacrifice her future to rescue her brother. And being a loving mother means teaching your child that kindness and boundaries can exist together. My revenge had never been about taking something from my father. I didn't want his money. I didn't want his house. I didn't want to embarrass him. I simply wanted my life back. And that was what I got. I forgave my father. But forgiveness didn't mean handing him the keys again. It meant I could love him without surrendering myself. It meant I could sit at the same Thanksgiving table and still know where my boundaries were. It meant I could hear him say, "I'm proud of you," and finally believe he meant it. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't making the person who hurt you suffer. Sometimes it's building a life they can no longer control. And if you've ever been told that keeping your own money, property, or boundaries makes you selfish, I hope you remember this. You are allowed to protect what you worked for. You are allowed to say no. And you are allowed to love your family without letting them own you. If this story reminded you of something in your own life, take a moment to think about the boundaries you may have been afraid to set. And if you know someone who needs to hear that message, share this story with them. Sometimes a simple story can give someone the courage to finally say, "This belongs to me." Thank you for listening.